Also, East Coast, California, and Safer West County were really big help with all this. We borrowed a lot of their materials. We're looking at building community and trying to help each other. So a lot of you from other parts of the area, and we really want to see how we can knit this together, and that's what Safer West County is going to do. I really want to give a really special thanks to Michael Rex, the owner of Russian River Books and Letters, because he has been above and beyond the idea that we had when we started talking about this in January. But, let's put on a show. And suddenly we've got all this stuff going. So we really, really are grateful for everyone's help. We've got lots of other stuff going on the rest of the week and on Saturday. Again, you can go to our website and they'll have updated information. So who does not know Chief Turberville? You don't know Chief Turberville? Oh my God, okay. Michael doesn't know. That's about it. Everyone else in the world does. Okay,
He's not from here. He's not from around here.
Yeah, I don't know. Where did you come from? I don't know. So Marshall,
I can introduce myself if you want.
Okay, so he's been around a long time, so I will let him do that introduction. So thank you very much and welcome to you.
So Marshall Turberville, I guess part of the problem is I don't really like coming in bookstores. So that's maybe why you never met me. But I'm from Sonoma County, grew up here in northern Sonoma County, in Geyser. My dad was a volunteer chief up there. And in the summer of 1995, I started with CDF at Cazadero. At that time, I was going to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And then, over the course of the years, I eventually got hired full-time with Cal Fire in 2000. And I worked the summer of 1995, 1996 in Cazadero. And then I came back out here in 2009 as a battalion chief, overseeing Cazadero, the station by Corbell, and then also the Sea Ranch. So pretty much the whole coastal area, inland to literally with a Wildfire Ridge. That's Wildfire is the boundary for me. So pretty much, other than being at Cal Poly San Luis for 8 years, 8 years, I've been in Sonoma County. So I've, good or bad, I've been to most of the major fires in Sonoma County since 2000, or I at least know something about them because I was either helping investigate them or somehow involved in them. So I'm also associated with Northern Sonoma County Fire District, and wearing a different hat. Also associated with Coal Mountain Lookout with a different hat, Fire Safe Sonoma County in a different hat. So just a lot of different stuff. JC. And the JC, Fire Academy and Forestry Program. So, but tonight we're going to talk about wildland or wildfire fire behavior. I apologize if you heard me speak about it before. It's the kind of the same basic fundamentals, but I'm also going to kind of present it in a little different way. So later on this week, I think we're going to have topics about home hardening, right? Structural ignitability, something maybe about alert warning, landscaping. You're going to have a lot of other topics. And so take tonight's topic, wildfire behavior, as, the fire that just hypothetically just started, is that going to be a bad fire? I'm watching the smoke column. There's apps out there like Watch Duty and Pulse Point that help you, but kind of gives you an idea like what's the ingredients, what's the recipe for a bad fire. And then also when you guys think about landscape and think about defensible space, the home ignition zone, how do you keep the fire intensity down? What is the worst case scenario? What is going to be the problem? How do we do vegetation management? What produces embers that are going to defeat how your structure is built? If you're trying to evacuate, should I evacuate there or should I go there? There's going to be times when you could have all the alert warning you want, and I know cell phones don't always work out here. You're going to have to make decisions when there's no firefighter, no peace officer, someone not around. And I call it a smart ass comment, but when you need a firefighter, you need a peace officer the most, we're probably not going to be there for you. So you got to know how to make decisions on your own. It's going to be those critical seconds where maybe you decide to evacuate before you're officially told, or evacuation warning order, or you just make the right decision. So try to cover a lot of different stuff tonight, and we'll go to the next slide. So I think this will be posted too on YouTube, so you guys can go back. While this is being set up, this is the Cape Fire in 2019 from Geyser Peak. That Friday afternoon when it crossed Pine Flat Road. And then that Saturday morning, you guys know, because you probably were evacuated when the wind surfaced or predicted to surface Saturday night, early Sunday. That's where it came off the top of Pine Flat Road and then eventually burned into winter by that next Sunday. So wildfire behavior, 3 fundamental things that if you've heard me talk before, you know about this or know about it, is fuel, weather, and topography. So that's what we're going to talk about. But I'm going to kind of frame it in a little bit different way tonight. So we can go to the next slide. because I could go into all these different topics. This is what the fire behavior courses are about. This is what firefighters train on. You know, this is very elaborate. We got all our fuel categories. We got all our weather components, and then we got topography. And if you look at all the fuel stuff, you know, horizontal continuity, vertical arrangement, how you break up the vegetation, why we're doing prescribed burning up on the Jenner Hethman shaded fuel break. You know, we're trying to break up fire's ability to spread from one bush to the next bush, or blade of grass to the next blade of grass. And then how wet the vegetation is. This is all good stuff, all real scientific. And it helps me predict, you know, what's the fire going to do so we can make good tactical decisions. Here's the weather. I bet everybody knows, right? The wind and how dry the air is huge. And dry air means dry vegetation. No rain, no precipitation like we're having now, February 20th. I think we're on 40-something days of no rain. That's all having an impact. So, and then we got topography, the lay of the land. And so I'm going to keep it real simple. I'm going to talk about ignitions. I'm going to talk about intensity. I'm going to talk about rate of spread. But very top level, it's pretty simple. Wind blows, fire goes. If the wind's blowing, the fire's going to go. We've seen that on Kincaid. Saw a little bit of that on the Walbridge. Saw it on the Myers. And that's going to carry embers downwind. That if it's receptive, meaning the ember's competent to start a fire, it's going to start a fire. So wind, most dominant driver. Fire wants to burn up slope. That's the wind blows it down slope, but fire wants to burn up slope. So fire does the opposite of water. And then fire burns what's dry, what's available to burn. So if the fuel moisture, water in the fuel is high, it's probably not going to burn it. So if you're landscaping lawn, probably not going to burn it. If it's bone dry because we haven't had any rain, and I don't know if we're going to get rain, I hope we do. Is everything going to be so dry that it's just going to be available to burn? Kind of think about curing wood to burning your fireplace, right? So those are all the things I could go on. Stuart just took a 32-hour class on this. I'll spend a lot of time talking about this, but I'll kind of make it simple or simpler hopefully for you. We can go to the next one. Here's what affects ignition. Okay, so if we're talking about an ember, somebody throwing a cigarette out, an ember landing around your house, these are the four factors. You know, they're a little blurry there, but size and shape of the fuels. You know, can you hold ember lands on a big log? Hold a match up to a big log. Probably not going to burn unless it's really, really dry. Okay, so size and shape. But if it's grass, you know, that's smaller diameter material, it's going to ignite from an ember. The compactness, okay, how it's a really compact out. You know, think about a piece of newspaper. You compact it, crumple it up. A little harder to burn or get burning if it's has air, it's spaced out a little bit. So if things are compact, that gets a little tricky when we talk about wood chips around houses and if you chip stuff. But in general, chip material, touching the ground, very compact, does not burn as well. It'll burn, but it's not a big problem. But it could, if it's really windy, these extreme events could create embers. There we see fuel moisture content again, how much water's in the fuel, is it available to burn? And then the last thing is how hot the fuels are. So we see that on a daily basis. Usually our fires around here start in the afternoon when the sun's overhead, things are dry, the fog's offshore, and our fuel temperatures get to a point they can ignite. So this is what starts embers, spot fires. Think about starting a fire. Think about burning safely. You're dumping ashes. This is what we need. All these four things to come together for a fire to happen. Okay, so those are the factors that affect ignition. So when you're managing landscaping, thinking about where I could hit spots, where something could ignite, think about that. You know, do you want to irrigate? Do you want to break it up? All this stuff comes into play. Okay, the next one is factors that affect intensity. So this is how hot the fire burns. How big of flames is what we visually see, but how hot the fire burns, how much heat is being produced. And very simply, I don't know if the next slide, okay, is are you going to burn blades of grass in your fireplace or cook with in a campfire, or are you going to burn logs? Right? You're going to burn the bigger material, produces more heat. From the firefighter point of view, more heat means we need more water to put it out. It's harder to control. And if it's producing embers, those are all potential spot fires. And so this is fire intensity. Remember, visually, it's the flames we see, but it's the heat being produced. And so all the accumulation of vegetation is a bunch of deadened down logs. Things just accumulated over time. And you're hearing that, you know, the problem we're having now, in addition to the weather changes, is by putting out fires for us 100 plus years, there's just much more vegetation out there to burn. So that's how fuel loading comes into play. Now, obviously, land management practices, whether it be grazing, logging, masticating, whatever it may be, also come into play too. But when you're talking about your house igniting or you evacuating, if there's a bunch of material that can burn and produce heat, that's heat bombarding your house. You know, if you built your house right, hopefully it survives that. But if you're trying to drive down a road, that's all now heat just on your car or on firefighters trying to get to your house. So think about that as that's just strictly heat. You want to manage or reduce, change the orientation, which gets here, change it from a vertically orientated to a horizontal orientated, break it up. There's again, we see fuel moisture content. And remember, we saw fuel moisture content also with the factors that affect ignition. It's huge. We're going to see it with the rate of spread, also the factors that affect the rate of spread, how fast a fire can burn. The drier the fuels, the more readily they can burn. That's the problem we're having with the drought. And then it's kind of a little bit, maybe not intuitive here, but rate of spread, just meaning that if a fire burns through quickly, by the pure definition of what fire line intensity is, it's a rate, so it's per second. So when it burns quickly, that's why the quicker it burns, the less intense. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to burn for 2 hours, 6 hours, multiple days. So that's what gets confusing when we present it this way. So this is heat next to your house, heat next to your driveway, heat that makes it impossible for firefighters to stop the fire if we don't have enough water. Means we got to stay behind longer and sit on the fire and watch it because it just keeps producing heat. So the heat bombarding your house, heat bombarding the fire line, those are the fire intensity factors. But the last one we'll go to, we can advance it, is the factors that affect the rate of spread. So this is what causes a fire to, escape what, even though we give it our best effort as firefighters, we just can't get around it. What we call perimeter control, stopping the edge of the fire, we just can't get around it. So it gets to be the big fire, the fire that gets out of control, burns multiple days. A scenario like in 2020 was just lightning, multiple fires at one time. But we get really strong winds, not just the flame front moving, but also embers landing down the front of it. Okay, huge problem for us. So windy days are a problem. And we have scenarios out here in the afternoon with the afternoon fog wind where we could have just a bad fire for like 2 to 4 hours. And we just can't accumulate enough firefighters in time to make a difference. Okay. So this is the offshore Kincaid wind event, right? The glass fire wind event, okay, Tubbs fire wind event. This is what it looks like when it blows offshore. So wind, the most dominant driver. But remember, every afternoon our fog winds could be a problem. The steepness of the slope. Remember, fire wants to go uphill. Anything in nature that goes uphill faster than downhill, pretty sure that's still a correct statement. And pretty much goes the opposite of water. So if water goes up and down a channel, that's where fire wants to go up. I'm kind of making binary statements here, but we just got to remember some of these channels do have moisture, right? Creeks and stuff. So not every creek, not every river is the end of the world. But fire wants to burn uphill. Steepness of slope. So if your house is up a slope or fire can start below it, that could potentially be a problem where the fire is going to just gain a lot of momentum as it burns up that slope. And then we see it again here with, remember, fuel moisture, the type of vegetation burning. Okay, grass burns real quick. It's our fastest fuel. Okay, timber litter, slower, it's shielded from the wind and the trees. So the change in fuel type, and you can also associate that with change in fuel moisture. If it's shaded, we want shade. That means it's more moist. So when you think about, is this a bad fire day, bad fire afternoon? Hey, this fire's burning, somewhere in our area. Look at the weather. What's the weather telling you? Okay. And then just real quick, as you can see it here, you guys are trying to make a prediction of where a fire is going to go. Watch the smoke, because the smoke is telling you where the wind is blowing. So it became very obvious on the Kincaid fire. It's burning in the east part of the county. Here's Hillsburg. I think that's Guerneville. If the smoke is blowing over you, that's telling you the fire's coming your way. It's only really how long it's going to take to get there. And it's not just that flame front, the big wall of flames, it's embers. How far are the embers landing ahead of you? So that's why in 2019 Kincaid fire, the decision was to evacuate everybody out to the ocean, because there was a theory modeling that an ember could land over 101. Once it gets over 101 into Forestville and out here, West Side Road, there's just no good place to stop it. Plus, it would just be a lot of acres burning, not enough firefighters. So that's why that decision was made. But to my point here, just watch where the smoke's going. That's telling you where the fire wants to go. Okay. So the next one. we'll kind of dive into some of this stuff a little bit more. Here's a forest that burned. This was a prescribed burn we did. It kind of looks like what we're doing yesterday and today as well up on Magic Mountain. And this just burned what we call one of the surface fields. Okay, never got up in the trees. Okay, does it look natural to you? Probably not. And how this happened is this landowner went through and limbed everything up, took away all the surface vegetation, built burn piles, and then it became an understory burn. And so the fire never got up in the trees. All these leaves never became embers. And so this is kind of it's a very pristine setting. A lot of money invested by this property owner to do this, but it's really the point that if we can manage our surface vegetation, and by putting fires out, that's how we've decided to manage them. Now they're just accumulating. If we manage the surface fuels, the surface fire intensity, it keeps it out of the trees, keeps the fire on the surface of the earth, and we reduce the amount of embers down the land. And so think about this around your house. You know, these flames were only a couple feet at most, okay, versus these trees burning that are now producing embers and more heat. And then I haven't taken a photo of that. Next thing will prove it. I'll show you something, but I haven't gone back and looked at these trees, but none of these trees died. They live on. They're more resilient. And these are all coastal live oaks in this scenario. So this could be redwoods. This could be Douglas fir trees. You know, it could be eucalyptus even. So I hate to give one tree, one plant a bad name. It's more how they're managed, how they're spaced, and around your house. Shady fuel breaks, remote locations, like we're getting in the business of doing again. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep the fire on the surface so we can intentionally ignite it. Aerial delivery of retardant. The air tankers can get the retardant to hit the ground. But unfortunately, what we've done is we've kept putting out the easy fires. This is an easy fire for us to put out. And so that's just allowed all this stuff to continue to grow. Okay, fill it in. So this is what a shaded fuel break looks like. If you're thinking about defensible space, you know, something you may want to make it look like is you want to keep the fire on the surface of the earth. And I kind of think historically, this is maybe how most of California used to burn, with a low intensity on the surface of the ground. And someone just sent me an article today. I forget what publication it was from, but it was something like, if you need to wear shoes to do prescribed burning, maybe you're burning a little too intensely. So historically, it was a much low intensity fire. I forget the headline, but it was something like that.
Here, Jeff, I'll just make a comment that in a way it looks sort of like a park because you can walk through it, whereas an unmanaged forest is really hard to walk through. So I'm not saying, you know, everything needs to look like a park, but it kind of gives you a visual on what it should look like to reduce those ladder fuels and those ground fuels.
Yeah, so surface fuels in the ground, we call them ground fuels. And then we got ladder fuels that connect surface fuels to the canopy or the aerial fuels. And so you don't see any ladder fuels here. So that's why the fire's staying on the ground. And so the burning we're doing out at Magic Mountain, the fire's staying out on the ground. The tricky part out there is we do have dead tan oaks and things. So the fire is climbing up the tree trunks and then the trees are falling over. That's what we're dealing with out there. But it's all staying on the surface of the earth. So this is a fire we can control. Okay, along your driveway, you guys can drive out because you're not going to get a bunch of flames and not a lot of smoke. You're going to be survivable. And the term being defensible space is all about your house surviving without firefighters there. But you can also think about it this way. You know, can you survive there as a person? If you get trapped there, can you survive in your house? And by doing things like this, it may make it so you can survive. It's a matter of staying calm. But when firefighters go to defend your house, we're not putting on air, oxygen, or anything. We're going dressed like this. As a matter of fact, I really said in that pants. We're going, just going to your house and saving your house without any supplied oxygen. So, you know, if you think you can make it safe for us to be there, you're making it safe. If you get in a real bad bind, what I'll tell you is, if you don't know where your next safe spot is to go when you're evacuating, just have your freak out moment at a spot you know, like your house. I hate to say it that way, but remember, when you need a firefighter who stops for the most, we're probably not going to be there for you. Your house can be your safe haven. You can, that defensible space, managing your vegetation, how your house is built, helps us save your house. The house saves itself, but it also gives you a safe spot to be as well. Safer spot. Sure, Jeff. Yes. Anything limbed up. Let's go to the next slide. Do you have a question too? I'll show you.
Are you suggesting that we stay with our houses?
So that whole theory is leave early or stay and defend. I'm not saying don't ever stay at your house. I'm not saying don't ever. What I'm saying is if you don't know the fire's coming at your house and you don't know if you can get down your driveway or where you can go to be safe, that's what I'm saying. It might be better you stay at your house. Not everyone's in a different position. I'm just saying someone with a long driveway, someone that doesn't, right? That's a situation I'm talking about.
It's situational. So the main word there was might. It might be a good idea.
I'm not saying stay behind. That's the whole leave early or stay and defend topic. And we're not advocating that. What I'm saying is if you're in a situation where you're at your house and you haven't been told to evacuate, the fire just started, or someone hasn't told you to evacuate, and the fire's coming to your house and you don't know where you can go down your driveway. You don't know if you can make it out Old Casadero Road, or you're gonna maybe meet a fire truck head on, or maybe there's power lines down, a tree down. All I'm saying is if you've done your homework, done defensible space, built your house right, it may be best you stay there and have your freak out moment there versus halfway down your driveway or when you meet that power line or meet the fire truck.
This would be more applicable to your rural areas, not rural residential, where the houses are lined up in the ends.
Yeah, so we want to talk about the high density areas, and you can go back and look at Oakland Hills in 91 or Coffee Park in 2017. Really now we're talking about house to house burning, independent of the vegetation burning. And I'm talking about wildland fire behavior, but the mitigation there is more than how your house is built, right? If your neighbor's house is going to impinge your house, that's a different scenario. So the mitigation there, in my opinion, more is how the house is built versus the landscape.
And he's also saying, get the information early and leave early.
Yeah, I'm just saying there might be a situation where, and I don't know where you live, but a fire starts and you're not going to get a SoCo alert in the first 15 minutes, 30 minutes, right? I mean, there are situations where to get that process going, it may be too late for the homes that are immediately threatened. So I'm just saying, if you're in that position, you got to think about that. Some of you may be in that position. So this kind of goes back then, Sarah, to your question a little bit is, we're talking about the fuel or fire loading, right? We got the wind. Eventually the understory burns, it gets up in the trees and it starts burning. So what I'm trying to describe is how do we break the cycle? Okay? There's 3 things, and you can choose which of the 3 you want to do. You can manage the surface fire intensity, how hot the fire is going to burn under the forest. So that would be, no pun intended here, raking the leaves, raking everything up, right? Keeping the surface fire intensity down. The other thing you can do is limb these trees up, right? Give it space that the fire burning, right, has to go produce heat that goes up in the trees and eats the trees and ignites them. The third one is you start taking out trees to break up the tree to tree spread, okay? Many times, the most cost-effective, simplest thing to do is just limb trees up. And then whether you leave it on site, lop and scatter, pull it to a chipper and chip it, leave the mulch behind, or you do pile burning. Those are some different variations of how you manage that pet vegetation. So to keep the surface fire intensity low, doesn't extend up into the trees. That's my marshmallow theory. If you have a marshmallow over a campfire, you can hold it high enough that it's not going to ignite, right? But if you lower the marshmallow down closer and closer, it eventually ignites. Okay, so we want to keep the marshmallow high. We want to keep the base of the tree high.
Okay, so let's say you're in the canyon, just as a hypothetical. Let's say wind is howling, you got a big world, okay, and you do that. But houses are on slopes. So you want to get rid of those limbs that are close to the roof, for example, even though you've done a lot down at the bottom of it. This is like reality of the Russian River. And when you talk about how well your house is built, I think that's kind of hilarious given the general standard of construction here, right? So,
yeah, and I'm just talking about options, right?
yeah.
None of this stuff's cheap. It's just you want to invest in your house, build your vegetation. A lot of it we focus on the vegetation. So I think that's your question. So So the bay tree up against the house or any tree up against your house, why do you see that as a problem?
Well, because the bay leaves are like right on the roof.
Okay. So you see it as a problem because the leaves can land in your gutter, land on your roof. An ember can land on those leaves now in your gutter.
Rather the trees on.
Okay, so an ember landing in the tree catches the tree on fire?
Yeah.
Okay, it's possible, it's not highly probable. And the only really mitigation for that is just totally cut the tree down, right? So I'm just presenting it like matter of fact, right? So that's an option, just cut the tree down. Okay, otherwise you're gonna have to keep your gutter clean. If your roof is built properly, a leaf can burn on your roof and it won't penetrate through your roof surface. Okay, now wood shingles, other things, not so much. Okay, leaves in your gutter, likely it could get your roof on fire. Okay, so it just depends on how you want to identify the most likely risk you're going to experience. And what I was using here as an illustration is if you limb that bay tree up, you're keeping the fire on the surface of the earth. Right? Because here's just another smart ass thing I'll tell you. You can build your house out of concrete, clear cut 100 miles around you, and I'm still never going to say your house is going to survive every fire scenario. So you just got to understand what acceptable risk do you want. So if that bay tree is very important to you, then you want to limit up and make sure you do a very good job of keeping your gutters clear and your roof clear, which is also the law. But I'm not advocating to go clear cut a bunch of trees down around houses. And then if the bay tree has a possibility of going treetop to treetop, then we should talk more because you want to break the continuity up. If you live on the top of a steep slope, well, now we got some other things to talk about too. So it's very hard to say, do this, right, and you'll be fine. Everything's got to be taken into context. So, but if you understand how fire wants to burn, what produces embers, that's kind of the fundamentals I'm getting at. And hopefully you could then apply to your situations. But the laws, right? CAL FIRE, the fire district goes and enforces defensible space laws. There's a state law. That's pretty much all that's enforced out here. Public Resources Code 4291. We can also talk about an assessment, which is just not the law, but it's telling you much more about. And so there's different options like that. I think you're gonna have some of those talks later this week. So does that kind of make sense how we're gonna break that cycle? All right. Limit the trees up, reduce surface fire intensity.
It seems like there's a bit of a conundrum in that you could limb up thin trees, but then you're creating a lot of fuel on the ground, which is not necessarily your friend, but you know, if you had to choose between one or the other, reducing ground fuels versus limbing up and increasing ground fuels,
Limb up,
how do you strike that balance?
limb up. This the fancy firefighter terminology is keep the fire. The fire that gets in the trees is fire in the third dimension. We can't stop a fire in a third dimension. And the windier it is, the steeper the slope, right? The more possibility, we could have fire in the third dimension than ground fire. If you lop and scatter, we have a better chance of keeping the fire on the surface of the earth. I would just lop and scatter up, no branch is closer than 6 feet to the ground. You might need to cut along the trunks up to 10 feet. And then over time, as the lop and scatter, we're talking 18 inches, right? Keep dicing it up so it's not really deep, knee high. Over time, those fuels are then going to start decomposing. And remember, we taught, there was a previous slide about vertically orientated versus horizontally orientated fuel orientation. Fuels that are upright versus fuels that are horizontal. Horizontal fuels don't burn as readily or as available. Think about like a candle or a match. You hold the candle or match up, straight up, and then you start turning it over. If you totally turn all the way over, the tip of the match, the candle will start burning. Okay? If you turn it sideways, it's not going to burn as much. And I think you have an engineering mind, right? Convection, conduction, radiation. You want to take one of those heat transfers out. And so, the lop and scatter, I would recommend that.
I would say too that you can't do everything perfectly all the time, but I would emphasize the closer you are to the structure, the more that you can remove that ground fuel. Actually, that is better. But way out, further, 100 feet or 200 feet out, maybe you can compromise on that. But as it's moving to the structure, you do want to try to get as much of this litter or even slash piles are really problematic. People pile them up and they're 6 feet high, and then you got a big problem. So emphasizing structure out.
We got one more question. I'll just say, I am not advocating logging or cutting trees down because we want the shade. We want the fuel moisture to stay high. We want the ground to stay wet. So you can thin trees if you want, but I'm not really saying that should be a go-to maneuver.
Typically speaking, if you have a grass field, let's say grass is 2 to 3 feet high, how high will the flames actually be? And there's some sort of ratio.
Yeah.
For ground cover burning versus the high.
Yep.
That's kind of gonna give you an idea of how high the flame.
Yep.
Something.
Yeah, so the how 2 foot tall grass, a lot of it's going to depend on how dry the grass is. Remember the intensity factors affect the intensity, how dry it is, how steep a slope it is, and then also the wind. But 2 foot tall grass could easily produce 6 foot tall flames. 6 feet, yeah. It all depends whether we'll call it a head fire, right, the fastest moving part of the fire, or we'll call it backing fire that's backing against the wind, burning against the wind, burning against the slope. But the best thing you can do with grass is change it from a vertically orientated fuel to a horizontal. Just by weed eating, just by same tons per acre there, by taking it to a horizontal, you're reducing the fire, the potential of those flame lengths greatly. Okay, grazing, but remember, as Stuart was saying, the best thing is work from the house out.
And that's with no wind and no slope. He was saying 3 times, basically.
And the best thing about grass is it burns quickly, so you don't have 2 hours of smoldering stuff around your house. It burns through quick. And grass in general, in comparison to brush and timber, doesn't produce as much embers, or competent embers. Okay, so grass is almost the best case around your house, other than bare dirt or anything more drastic.
But cut your grass.
But cut your grass. Yeah. The other thing, I mean, this is just me talking, my opinions here, or my opinions from fires I've been to, is a lot of folks are talking about, turning on sprinklers once the fire gets there. We can, that's a whole nother topic, but I would think a better investment of your water is start watering your grass in the late summer, early fall, try to replicate, surrogate what normally your range would have. Start turning your brown grass into green grass, raising that fuel moisture. And then if a fire does come towards your house, at least there's some green grass that'll slow it down, and maybe even put the fire out. So I think that's a better use of your water is irrigation, than thinking you're going to turn sprinklers on with the fire coming at you. But we could talk about sprinklers. There might be a good time and place for that, but that's not the purpose of tonight's talk. Am I going to get cut off after an hour, or I can just, I think we're probably going to go. So this is some of the larger fires in this area, and I kind of did, put a lot of stuff to the north. There is another slide up there, but Gilder Ridge, Mount Jackson area, Forgotten Valley, those all make sense where these fires are at. Okay, and then obviously everyone knows about the Wall Bridge. You could see 40s, 60s, and then 2020. There's a lot more fires that are happening out here, but remember the factors that affect ignition, factors that affect intensity, factors that affect spread. We are, good or bad, doing a pretty good job of putting fires out here. Fires are happening. There's a fire 2 nights there yesterday in Monterey. Okay, there's a fire back a couple weeks ago in Monterey on a Thursday. There is fire happening. There's fire happening. Fires are occurring. Okay, so we got the ignitions. They're just not burning that intensely, and they're not burning with a great rate of spread. When they do, like the Wall Bridge, it's almost nothing we can do. It's just the topography out here is very steep. We don't have shaded fuel bricks. We don't have access points. And also in the Wall Bridge, there's also lack of firefighters. There's other fires going on. But that's our fire history, large fire history up here. Okay, these are the fires that are more than 10, 20 acres. And Sonoma Land Trust, the reason I'm referencing their website is it's interactive. Not if you go to the Cal Fires, you've got to know GIS and things like that. So Sonoma Land Trust doesn't have the last couple of years, but that's this link here is Sonoma Land Trust. Okay. Yeah.
So we had a fire that came within 2-3 miles of our town here. And so what I'm wondering is, all that burned area, is that going to make it more likely for us to have fire here, or less likely for us to have, or for fire to spread into our town? Should there be another fire up in the forest sometime?
So we're talking, yeah, so there's no easy yes or no question here or answer here, because a lot of the area burned differently. So some of the area is still a real nice forest. It just burned on the surface, didn't get up in the trees, right? That probably, I would say the risk has now been reduced because now we're gonna get the surface fire intensity down. There's other areas that are now converted over to grass, and grass can burn every year, but grass doesn't produce the embers that are gonna land in county or land on somebody's roof. So it's a real mix. I can't give you a solid answer. But in general, I'm talking very general, having that fire happen, manage that, right? How many 20,000 plus acres or whatever you want to call here on the fire front here, manage all that vegetation. And I can tell you from burning at Magic Mountain, where we're burning right now, we burned this area 4 years ago. We're having a heck of a time to get it to burn now because all that leaves from the redwood trees of all were burned up 4 years ago, and enough new stuff has not fallen. So, and if you did look at these years, 40s, 60s, and 2020, you know, is it about a 40, 50 year fire return cycle that happens around here? Is everything now going to start accumulating again to support another major fire in 40 years from now? So remember, in general, the Wallbridge fire, all these fires are doing great from reducing the vegetation and fuel loading and reducing future surface fire intensity, but are they, you know, still could burn, right? And hopefully less ember production. So this is more of the West County fire history, the big fires. So here's the Wallbridge, which I'm sure everybody knows that. No one knew what Wallbridge Ridge was before, but now it's an everyday word. Wallbridge is out here. Okay, here's the Creighton Ridge and the Charles fires from the 50s, 1978. Creighton Ridge was the last biggest fire out here up to the Wallbridge and the Myers in 2020. Myers fire is here. You kind of notice for a couple different reasons, a lot of these fires are north to south, and that could be because of the wind, but also because of the topography, the wall river drainage. So my opinion, your biggest threat is that continued to be a fire coming from the north. Okay, which also, if you know this area, there's just no real good access out there, which also is why fires aren't happening. Most fires are caused by people. So we're just not getting ignitions until there's lightning, like the Wallbridge. And then because of that, it really hurts us because we just can't get to the fire quickly. Okay, so that, you know, looking historically, there's been a couple other fires that have burned east to west in the 60s that burned from Austin Creek over to Jenner. Okay, so that's happened before. But these are the fires that, you know, the north-south orientated fires that appear to be kind of the large fire potential. Remember, fire wants to burn with the wind, fire wants to burn up slope, and fire wants to burn where the vegetation's dry, where the fuels allow it to burn. Okay, so those are our fires. Okay, advance. This is really washed out, but the other thing, I do this every year. CAL FIRE has 3 lists. They have the 20 largest fires, the 20 most destructive, which is measured by houses burned. And then over here is the 20 deadliest, which is unfortunate, but that's just how many people are killed in fires. And I go through and I look at all this and I break them up by the cause. And so the largest fires, do you see what they're caused by? Lightning. 9 out of 20 in our top 20 list are caused by lightning. Okay. The common months, if you see here, are July and August. 14 of the 20 are in July and August. So lightning fires, maybe because they're middle of nowhere, maybe because there's a lot at a time, maybe because they happen early in the summer and then burn all summer, but that's our largest, okay? Here's our most destructive. 8 of 20, you guys see what the cause category is? Electrical or power lines, okay? So these are the fires that are happening in your homes, happening where the people are at. And so yes, they're gonna burn the most homes. What month of the year are they happening in? Is it October? 7 out of 20 are in October. So that's our windy season. The fuels are dry from all the summer months, okay? 7 out of 20. And then the deadliest, I can't even see it myself here, but it's gonna be the campfire. It's gonna be the next, it was the most Paradise, town of Paradise, burned the most homes and killed around 82 people. But you can see the cause is going to be human related. So somehow 5 out of 20 are people. Okay, people cause the fires that kill the most people, probably because it's around where homes are at. Okay, and then you can see I can't see right here, but it's very similar. It's the same month, October. Okay, so this is someone mowing their lawn on the wrong day, which was the Creighton Ridge fire in '78. Okay, someone pulling off into tall grass, someone doing a burn pile, someone dumping the fireplace ashes, human-related type cost fires. So that's what the trend is right now. Keep looking at CAL FIRE stats. Now, we also got to recognize the CAL FIRE statistics totally suck, going back anywhere before 1932, roughly. But this is the stats. And so every year I just re-up and refresh on what's causing our big fires. And it's lightning. And we definitely experienced that here with the Wall Bridge, LNU Lightning Complex. Question? Okay, keep going. So this is our red flag. This is our wind, okay? And so I just want to go over a couple slides here about our red flags. And you'll hear about a fire weather watch first, then you'll hear about a red flag. Okay, the way the National Weather Service controls the red flag warnings, not CAL FIRE, not the fire departments. So the National Weather Service hypothetically knows that we're going to have really strong winds combined with low fuel moisture, okay, and low relative humidity 7 days from now. They cannot, by their own policy, the way it's done, make it a red flag warning. So they got to wait. What they'll do is they'll first call it a fire weather watch, 18 to 96 hours. So 4 days before, they'll say, hey, fire weather watch for our North Bay Mountains above 1,000 feet, whatever the scenario might be. And then as it becomes imminent, highly probable, within 2 days, they'll make it a red flag warning. Okay, so they just elevate, upgrade, whatever you'd like to call it. It's not that they blew the forecast. They're just not allowed to call a red flag warning more than 2 days out in front of it. Okay, so pretty much if you guys hear a fire weather watch, it's pretty rare. I think it only happened once in the last 2 years. Fire weather watches turn into red flag warnings, and no one should be surprised. I don't want you guys to be surprised. So if you want to pre-evacuate, you want to pack up more stuff in your car, you want to stop doing burn piles, you want to do other factors to reduce ignitions, other factors to be prepared, you want to dust off your phone tree to notify your neighbors, that you should be doing that every time you hear about a fire weather watch. Okay, so it just kind of elevates the state of readiness. Okay, so red flag warning, fire weather watch. We'll talk about criteria. This is what we need to have. Our 10-hour fuel moisture is less than or equal to 6%. So that's our 1/4 to 1 inch vegetation. So think about large twigs, small branches. They got to be less than 6%. Okay, is it probably not too many firefighters here? Do you know what they're right now? We're getting down to 5 to 6% right now in February. Okay, these are our dead fuels, not live plants, dead. These are the twigs. Okay, down to 6%. The annual grasses have to cure. Okay, we don't have that right now, so that's why we don't have any red flags. We get our annual grasses cured. Most of them are still green, but they are curing because they're drying out. No ready rains in the last 24 hours. Well, we got that. Unfortunately, it's more than 24 days. And then we need sustained wind in RH greater than 8 hours. Okay, so we need 8 hours. So that's why when we have these afternoon fog winds or just a short burst of wind at night, it's not going to hit the 8-hour threshold. It's not going to trigger red flag. We have red flag conditions that are not advertised, publicly known red flag conditions. Okay, and that's why we have bad fires. And someone will say, like, I never knew. Well, it's because of how just the policy, I don't want to say bureaucracy, but just how this stuff is. Okay, so very simple, right? You always got to be prepared. Anything you do, no matter the time of year, think to yourself, could this cause a fire? And if it can, take mitigation. And then, think about just always being ready that we could have a fire and what's going to make the bad fire. And we can keep going. This is the matrix just showing the drier it is in relative humidity, the less strong winds you need. So if you got really strong winds, your RH, relative humidity, water in the air can be higher. Okay, so that's all this. This is a matrix. So we can go over this. Okay, so here's our trends and kind of why we are getting away from this summer fire season, going to talking about year-round fire season, but we still have trends. So I'll talk about seasonal trends and then the daily trends we got here. So let's advance. So this is a bad trend. This actually comes out of Colorado. A graph, which is showing is across the time here, going over the 2000. This is fire probability occurrence. We've always fluctuated, but we're exponentially having more and more fires right And the correlation is here with warm air temperature, climate change, global warming, right? With our longer seasons, lack of rain, makes sense. We are on this huge, never before seen increase, right? So when you think about those factors that affect ignition, like fuel temperature, fuel moisture, well, that's all contributing. We're just getting more hours of the year, more months of the year, more days of the year we can have a fire, okay? How bad that fire is, right? Intensity, structures lost, lives lost, varies, but we're having more and more occurrences of fire. So even though this is Colorado, I can't tell you for sure this is California, but I can tell you this for sure. When I started with CDF in 1995, and got hired full-time in 2000, it is, I'll use the term crazy. It is crazy the amount of fires during the summer that are happening in the state of California. Okay? Like nonstop. My friends are at fires everywhere up and down the state. That would only happen about once when I started, maybe like one siege. Now it's almost like the whole summer is a siege. So I don't have the stats, I don't have the studies, but I'd put forward that we are doing the same thing here in Sonoma County in California that is documented in the subalpine forest in Colorado. Here's another little, this is really hard to understand here, but what this is saying, and these are red flag warnings by month. So January through December, and it goes from, I don't see the year down here, but this is 2006 up here. I think this is 2019. And you can see now we're getting red flag warnings in January of 2014. We got 3 of them. We're getting red flag warnings in November. No red flag warnings yet in December. Oh, this is December. We had 1 in December. But right here this month, there's 6 red flag warnings in October of 2019. Okay. We are just getting these weather events that meet red flag criteria. So we're getting now in January, maybe nothing in February, but we are getting, this year-round fire potential. So the fuel moistures, how dry the fuels are for ignitions, the factors that affect intensity, okay, it's happening. So year-round fire season is not just some new cliche. It is proven by the weather and just fire occurrences. You just don't always hear about the fires in the winter because we do a good job when we put them out. It's just leading to other problems. Okay, so and then the acres, right? 2020 was a huge year, 4 million acres. Okay, we did beat it last year, thankfully, in 2021. But we're seeing, right, both ignitions, the number of fires down here, and the acres. But statistically, if you read some of the history, Stephen Pine is a well-known author. 4 million acres was probably on the low end of what burned in California historically. We could think about like the Wallbridge fire. If we never put the Wallbridge out, which was lightning cost, it would have kept burning right through September, October, November until it would have rained. So a lot more acres burned. And this is just numbers regarding ignitions and acres. It doesn't talk about intensity and how bad it burned. So we know that more acres historically burned in California, which is probably not at the same intensity we're seeing in modern era. Last 20 years, I can say personal observation. We can advance. So some more seasonal trends. So this is not this year, but this is last year, 2021. But we know we're getting more and more drought. Things are drying out. And it's not in the media right now, but the effects now of 40 days in the winter of no rain, when we normally would have rain, that's going to have effect on our vegetation. Our large logs are going to be much more drier in June than they would historically be. Remember, that's going to affect our fire intensity. So these are seasonal trends. We're getting drought. Quickly. Okay, let's give it for the sake of time to do that. Okay, and if you go back to the previous graph, I'm not going to explain the graph a lot, but this is stuff firefighters look at, all these indices, and it's no surprise that on these big fires here, Tubbs, Kincaid, I don't have the Wallbridge up here. We kind of know. If we look at our indices and our graphs, we know what days are bad days for fires. Okay, they're for sure red flag days, but we have other indices like energy release component. We know when it's like a 97th, a 3% day. Only 3% of the time has it ever been higher than the 97% line or the 90th line. So we know it's just this is not red flag stuff. It's a red flag day, but it's more internal business procedures. We know when we have these bad days, and we've had these bad days with no fires, no fires happening, and they don't get publicized. we know about these bad days when a fire happens. So seasonal, daily, and just on the daily basis, right? This is a 24-hour diurnal process. You know, we should get our fog cycle. We live by the ocean, right? This is a coastal community. We should get the fog, right? The June gloom, we're getting it now in February. But that should be the cycle. If we get the afternoon fog coming in, cooling it down. Granted, there's some wind with that could cause a fire. So that's how the fog system works. Go into more detail with. Then we know that, you know, how strong the sea and land breeze is based upon high and low pressures. So sometimes we get the fog really far inland. There's Santa Rosa Plain, Santa Rosa, even North County where I live, it's fog on some days, not every day. Fog doesn't make it into Lake County. I think it only makes it Lake County about 4 times a year. It's all based on the larger air mass that's going on. So that's our seasonal process. Keep going. Daily process. Here's something about the valley fog or inversions where yesterday with the Monterey fire, the smoke was held in the canyon. But this is what we see, you know, a little bit here in the Rush River Valley. Some of you guys live above the fog, but you know about what the height of the fog is? About 1,000, 1,500 feet. Because I'm going to talk about nocturnal drying event, which is a phenomenon here in a little bit. So that gives us some protection if you're in the lower elevations here, that you're going to get the cool, moist air. Hopefully it happens every day. Fog, but that's going to give you some protection if you're below 1,000 feet, below 1,500 feet. And if you look at our red flag warnings, most of them are just for the mountains for 1,000 feet and above. Okay? They're not technically for down here because we're below 1,000 feet. But what I tell folks is it doesn't matter. We should apply that red flag to everywhere, even though it technically doesn't apply here. Okay, because you should take the same precautions. 2017's red flag warning was all elevations, but we got complacent. People weren't paying attention to that. But it definitely happened that night when the fire came into Coffee Park. It was an all elevation. So this is about valley fog. We do get normal fog, not necessarily valley fog, but that, you know, the mountains here provide sideboard, provide rails to hold that moisture in, which is huge. Probably a reason too we have the redwoods and the vegetation we got here as well. So you do have some protection by living in some of the canyons here that don't get a lot of sun, get a lot of shade. That's all helping your fuel moisture. And then you're getting the daily fog coming in, which helps you also. Okay. But you also have those days where the fog doesn't come in, where it's very dry. So I'll just challenge you, should we prepare for those 2 days a year or for the other 363 days a year? Fortunately, we should prepare for those 2 days a year. Probability low, but the possibility is there. Okay. Keep going. This is our heat wave that we get. Growing up, I used to always think about, like, we used to get 2 weeks of really hot weather, 2 weeks of cool weather, and it's really about the highs and low pressures and what's called the subsidence inversion. This is the high pressure that parks over us, and the, you know, day 1, day 2, day 3. The longer the high pressure sits in, the warmer it gets. And then we got the low pressures, and then as the high moves, then we get that really windy fog day. Like everything, you know, the fog starts coming in. But during this high pressure omega, day 1, day 2, it's just drying our fuels out. Okay, and then it takes a while for the fog, the moist air to then mitigate that. So we can see this stuff coming. We can see the high pressures. We can see these setups happening. And right now, I think the reason we're not getting our winter storms is there's a high pressure offshore forcing the jet stream up and over. So we're just not getting our normal wintertime weather. So this is the summer heat wave scenario. Keep going. This is the monsoonal moisture, the lightning we had in 2020 that started the Wall Bridge and the Myers. So we know, you know, what to watch out for. That lightning was predicted. Okay. I think part of the problem here locally, we've had lightning fires, not every year, but every couple of years. Just none came without rain and very warm, dry conditions. Okay. And then multiple counties got lightning. So, you know, Lake County got hit really bad. Napa County got hit really bad, and then the East Bay got hit really bad. So this is that monsoonal moisture coming up and the lightning. So we do, you know, simply pay attention to weather-wise. So we keep going. Okay, this is more of the Sierra Nevada lightning, not necessarily us, but this is stuff we watch and keep going for sake of time. Okay, this is what gets us. This is the offshore winds. Okay, so do we feel those out here very much? Do they channelize down the Russian River drainage, Cazadero Canyon, or not much? Or do they do it a little bit? We just maybe don't know because the trees are shielding us a little bit.
Definitely
Because-
stops the fog from coming.
Stops the fogs. That's when we get the multiple days of dry weather. Yeah. Get some, Josh? Sure.
To say, McCray and Jackson did a pretty good job of
Yep.
walking the other side of the water. You feel very hot winds on those days. It's starting to be low, so it seems to be over 1,000 feet.
I agree. So the true north wind that affects most of the other rest of the county doesn't make its way out here. But you guys notice you don't get fog. But just like Kincaid, could a fire come from the east, right? The east to west moving fire scenario, right? All the historical bad fires have been more from the north to south. But the Kincaid was a game changer now. We had a fire that almost potentially threatened to jump 101 and come out here. Okay. And I'm not going to ask if you stayed behind or not in Kincaid, but I wasn't out here to see what the winds were like that early Sunday morning. But I don't know, maybe it was windy out here then. Maybe that was a kind of a wake up that type of wind event maybe is in our future that could then affect the lower Russian River. Because that theory would be basically the fire would follow the Russian River path, right? They funnel down the Russian River corridor. And when it burns these trees around here, yes, it's going to kick embers downwind. Okay? So we measure basically the difference in pressure between Winnemucca and San Francisco. And so that's how they talk about these offshore winds. So how strong they are. Keep going. But our ridges, I'll talk about it here in a little bit. So this is what it looks like. This is showing you the wind coming from Redding. And then eventually over time, it turns offshore and goes right over Sonoma County. And if you look, it doesn't really follow right along the Russian River, the river itself, but it does come over this part of Sonoma County. Okay, so maybe this is going to become more realistic too, that we can have a fire coming east to west that affects this area. So we've got the north to south moving fire, we've got the east to west, maybe a possibility in the future. Otherwise, most of our fires here are just going to want to burn up slow. Okay? And hopefully that's away from homes, but not away from homes on tops of ridges. Okay, we keep going. Let's go through this. That's 28. But here's the things you see when these winds do pick up. This red line is our air temperature. This green, but also the blue line is our relative humidity. And you're seeing it's kind of like a light switch, just like the sundowner winds in Santa Barbara. As soon as these winds come or hit the ground, temperature goes straight up in a matter of minutes, relative humidity goes down. And as soon as that happens, remember fuel temperature, fuel is being available to burn, relative humidity, water in the air, now drying out the fuels, drying out the vegetation. So that's a light switch that happens. If you're not paying attention to this, you may not realize it, but this stuff happens quite a bit. Almost the reverse happens when the fog comes on shore too. Okay, keep going. Let's get through this. Okay, I want to talk about this. Let's get big right there. Let's get that out. We don't need to read it. So this is a phenomenon that happens out here. And sometimes firefighters are going to tell me, oh man, I didn't know the coast burns like this. There was a firefighter that went to the Myers fire and it was like 80 degrees on the Myers fire. It's like, man, it's always warm out here on the coast. And we don't realize it down here on the canyon bottoms. If you go up on the ridges, you start noticing what's called the nocturnal drying event. And this just got documented like 4 years ago. So our weather station in Santa Rosa, which is up by Fountain Grove, this is showing, and this is, I think this is the middle of winter. I think it's a January, February, but it's 46 degrees Fahrenheit and 99% relative humidity. So basically it's 46 degrees and it's in the pond. That's about 600 feet. Here's the Hawkeye Ross, 2,000 feet, 75 degrees air temperature and 13% relative humidity. Okay. All right. All the cold air sinks, all the fog down low. Okay. Then you say, well, that's just because that's the geysers. Well, let's go over to Oak Ridge above Annapolis. It's 76 degrees, actually warmer than Hawkeye, and it's 18% relative humidity. So the Pole Mountain Lookout, the ridges to the west of us, the ridges to the north of us, they can be very dry, very warm at night. Okay. And that's what some people don't realize. It's the nocturnal drying event. And if you guys want to know more about it, Craig Clement, San Jose State professor, he has some videos on it. One of his PhD students is the one who documented it. And the reason it got noticed is because 55 firefighters back in 2003 deployed fire shelters at 2 o'clock in the morning because they were excited to take a nap. They were trying to burn a hillside off and it wouldn't ignite because of the fog. And then 2 hours later, they're deploying fire shelters because of the nocturnal drying. So this is the phenomena that happens above the fog around here. So while down here, you're provided some comfort level with the fog, the moisture. Up on our ridges, it's a different story. I know this isn't the lower Russian River, the Russian River area, but we're starting to see the Tubbs fire in 2017 very closely was the 64 Hamley fire. The Glass fire, right? That never burned in our recorded history, but the same kind of orientation as the Tubbs fire. And I'm presenting it more that, remember that previous slide about the north-south potential fire? I just think that, you know, sometimes I mentioned it's like an earthquake zone, it's a fault, right? We have like known earthquake faults. Well, we have known like fire faults, right? Or some areas going to keep burning the same way. And so we just don't know because we don't have good history, or it happened so long ago before we colonized, civilized the area. We just don't know what is historical, how this area burned. We know if we cut trees open, you can see scars, you know, on the tree rings. We just don't know what is historical, what's natural. Is this area made to burn every 50 years, every 200 years? We don't know. We have some ideas in the redwoods, but you know, we're seeing these same kind of patterns again. Down to the last couple slides. That's what it looked like in 64 in the Hamley fire. Yeah, this is looking from Mount St. Helena down the Napa Valley, and all this smoke is blowing right east to west, right? Kincaid, Hamley, Tubbs. Okay. So that appears to be our biggest fire problem is wind-driven fires right now. Historically, it was too. Keep going. So here's some evidence of the nocturnal drying event. Here's our relative humidity being very, very low in the middle of the night. Okay, so usually folks aren't awake to notice this, but RH goes from 0 to 100% to a reading of 2%, 3% is very, very low. And last year in 2021, we actually got a 0%, which is theoretically like impossible, but it happened up at Oak Ridge. So our air temperatures are staying warm. This wasn't a big wind event, so we don't have the winds, but it's just that warm air above the fog. Okay. Keep going. This is the last slide. So when we talk about potential, remember, this is in the context of wildland fire behavior and all the other topics that you're going to hear about this week. But if we talk about potential, there's the non-fire season now. Okay? There's the late fall, winter, December, February non-fire season. Well, there's fires happening in the Russian River. Okay, 2 in the last 7 days. Okay, you know, are we going to continue to get the cool, moist, foggy summer? It seemed like last year, 2021, I don't have stats to prove my opinion here, but it seems like we kind of were more maybe like a normal cycle last year, more foggy mornings, more cool weather than the previous summers. But that's really what's held our fire potential in check because the vegetation gets moisture, less available to burn, okay? Or fire burns during the day, but foggy at night helps us hold it in check. Are we going to get those 2 week of high pressure heat waves followed by cold? Right? So we know fire's going to burn really bad for a couple of days, but eventually the weather's going to change and we're going to get around this. Okay? How many red flag warnings? So are we going to break the 6 in 1 month record? We're going to have a first ever February red flag, probably not this year. Okay, but that's a concern. I'm hoping through things like this and education awareness, we reduce ignitions. You're comfortable telling your neighbor, don't grind or don't cut that metal right now at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the grass. Okay, with cigarettes, whatever it may be, we're reducing ignitions, and we know PG&E is doing the PSPS shutting power off. Then, you know, we were lucky that last year we got, I'm going to say early season rains. We got some pretty good rains, 10 inches, went from like really bad fire behavior potential to nothing could burn potential. Okay, so that's really helpful if we continue to get that. Otherwise, now that summer fire season becomes the fall fire season. comes to January, February fire season. And the last thing that's gonna come up here in the red, this I'll leave you with, is just remember that any afternoon, any time of the day, we could have a 2 or 3 hours of really bad weather, mainly fog winds, or a fire that just burns up one slope anywhere out here. Okay, and that may not be predicted. That may not be a red flag. Okay? It doesn't meet the criteria. It doesn't meet the 8-hour sustained winds and our relative humidity. Or, you know, like what happened in Summer Home a couple years ago on Labor Day, one house caught fire, and now it's threatening 3 or 4 of the homes. And that's the problem with the terraced roads, you know, which are very common out here too. So that's all I got. Kind of covered a bunch of different stuff, but thanks for the questions, you guys. And fuels, weather, topography, I broke it down, factors affecting ignition, factors affecting intensity, and factors affecting rate of spread, and then kind of just presented some just observations over the years and just try to make it more than just a science class for you. But well done, fire behavior. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now the chief is gonna pick a number between 1 and 19.
I gotta pick this.
You gotta pick it.
14. I'll hang out for a while too if you guys have any questions or.
Oh, geez.
You can figure it out.
We could gift it to anybody else who needs it.
What's another name for fog winds? Is there another name?
Brett is gonna give away his go bag. Who's allowed to go bag?
Anybody need it?
What is it?
It's a go bag. I've got it somewhere. Here it is. Here we go. Thank you. It's a lovely go bag. It has a little radio.
It'll work out well online if it's still there.
It'll be fine. Toilet paper alone.
It's hard to stand in one spot that long.
Yeah, I bet.
There you go.
This is your framing. Was this your frame when you were looking?
Bob, try to look at the camera. Get it, it's the PowerPoint slides right there.
So hopefully you guys will get to the meeting. I want to thank you for now, for the slide for not here. I do apologize. But if you will go to the YouTube.
Absolutely. I've noticed in shady areas when I'm walking my dog, the grass is still up.
They look really good. Yep. We'll have a better. slide.
Yeah, and every situation is different.
These slides
That's what's so hard, but I
Well,
think
we'll have a better.
Not- Hard to answer questions, so yes or no. Apologize for that.